Right, little greenhouse update. So this is the cyanoglossom, and look, that is fantastic. So we've got a thick coating of compost, so the lid, that can come off now, and the compost should be enough to keep the seedlings dark. But you'll probably find that they have all started to germinate now anyway. So that's the cyanoglossom. Absolutely fabulous. And then the snapdragons, this is the legend like pink that we're growing together. So you've got the same, exactly the same seeds as me. I literally took them off the shelf. So these are coming on beautifully, but I can see that that tray does need watering. It is not that dry though. The seed tray is quite heavy. So I might just give this a little overhead water. I'm going to put the tray in the shade to water and then to dry off first, because I don't want to singe any of these seedlings with water droplets making a magnifying glass on the leaf, because you can burn your leaf. But they're doing really well. Madam Butterfly Bronze. So this is what the compost should look like. This one's nice and moist. So I will leave that one alone. Doesn't need watering. Got the ivory back here. Oh, we're doing ever so well, aren't we? And then over here, we've got the sweet rocket. That is coming along nicely now. And once all these seeds have germinated, we can give the seed trays a little topping up of compost. But this one does need a water. So I'm going to do that, but not all the cells. So I might just do a bit of spot watering with a tiny watering can. And then next door is the Nigella. That is coming along beautifully. So you can see where I put 2 seeds to a cell. They are nice and far apart. So if you want to keep both of them, that will make it easier because their roots won't get as tangled up together. But they are looking good. You can see it's slow and erratic, but they are all coming. So that one came up, and now this one's coming up, and this one here is a bit slower again. So you just need to have a bit of patience. But that's what's so great about the autumn, is we're in no hurry, are we? The clary sage continue to do well. So at this point, if you've got any empty cells, then you can add another seed because they germinate so quickly. I've got 2 empty cells there. Now that's not right, because you can see that they've all germinated 100%, and for both of them to fail in the same hole means I was too busy chatting to you and I didn't sow them in that cell. Oh, what a wally. So I can either transfer one of these little seedlings over to fill that space, or I can just sow another seed. Plenty of time, so you can make your own choice up if you've done what I've done.
Welcome back to the Grow Along, and today we are going to be sowing our cornflowers. My picture's been photobombed. Look at that. Now, cornflowers are one of the easiest seeds to germinate, and they will come up quite quickly for you. However, it is quite important that you sow them in the early autumn while it's still warm and while there's still plenty of light. Because if you sow them during the dark days of winter, they're not able to grow properly due to the low light levels. And what happens is they get quite a weak root system, which will often just rot off in wet, cold compost. So giving them a nice early start towards the beginning of autumn will give you the best results. So here are my cornflower seeds, and you can tell that they're cornflower seeds because they have this little tuft of water absorbing fibres sticking out. It's probably what makes them germinate quite so quick. And all I'm doing is I'm just dipping a little impression in the compost, and then I'm going to sow 1 seed per cell into the impression. Now if you want to, you can cover the seeds up, or they're so easy, you can just leave it exposed and then you can keep an eye on germination. Don't forget your label. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to sow this colour in the other half of the tray. And that's it. The tray has been pre-moistened. It's nice and heavy, so I don't need to water it at the moment. I'm going to pop it on the top shelf
in a nice light bright situation.
Cornflowers will grow slowly and steadily throughout the winter, and once we get to late winter, very early spring, just when we're about to sow some more seeds in the greenhouse, at that point we can move them out under the cold frame or into a sheltered spot to start the hardening off process, and we can plant them out in the garden long before the last of the frosts, freeing up some space in your greenhouse. These are the cornflowers, and this is about the 2-week mark. They come up very quickly. So these are my cornflowers. They're now 5 weeks old, and you can see they've produced the most fantastic root system, which will help overwinter them beautifully, and they'll be ready to get cracking. We'll probably pop them on in January into 15 cell trays, let them grow on for a little bit longer before planting them out in the garden, and they will literally get off to a flying start next spring. Now that all of this, if you imagine, this is 5 weeks hard work, and that is now been done. Next, I think it's got to be some twinkly stems of Breeza Maxima. There we go. I think that looks really nice. Now technically you can sow this in the spring, however I find the plants are much smaller, they bloom later, and because they start coming up about the same time as the weeds, I find that if you're not careful, if you plant them out, the weeds tend to take over and it's really difficult to weed in between. I also like to use the same bed for my panic and frosted explosion later. So for all of those reasons, I think an autumn jump starter, Breeza Maxima, is the best for me. It's not quite as hardy as some of our other plants, and we do have to be careful about it getting cold shock. So therefore we will sow it in a cold greenhouse over the winter and plant it out very early in the spring. So I've opened the packet and the foil carefully. Get quite a lot of seeds in your packet, and because they're quite big, what I'm going to do is I'm going to dip a hole in the compost, and then I'm carefully going to drop one seed as best you can per cell into the 40 cell tray. It makes a change to have something that's a bit easier to handle, doesn't it? And then I'm just going to gently cover them over. There we go. Don't forget your label. Let's pop that in the seed tray. Place the tray up on a bright shelf in the greenhouse. No need for a propagator lid. It is naturally warm and humid enough in here. Fast forward about 2 weeks, and you can see here we've got really good germination starting to occur. I'm just carefully taking out my Breeza Maxima by making sure that I squeeze from underneath, because it's got quite a delicate root system, so you don't want to rip them. Because they're a grass, I am actually going to add a bit of grit to their compost. I haven't really bothered that much with the others, and it doesn't matter if you don't have it, but it will just help with the drainage. I've got one here. Can you see we've got 2 seeds that are germinated in the same cell? They've done actually quite well, but I am going to separate them now. Now, as I said before, you can just get a pair of scissors and snip this one away if you're nervous, but if you're anything like me, 2 plants is better than 1. So I'm just going to very gently tease it apart, making sure that I keep equal amounts of compost around the roots of both plants. There we go. And I'm going to now give them a cell of their own each. Now, Breeza you need to be careful with, because if you mother it too much, it can get something called cold shock when we go to plant it in the spring. So what I'm actually going to do, because it's so mild at the moment, is I'm going to pop it outside under the cold frames now. So by the time we come to planting out time, it should barely notice the difference in temperature. I'll reassess the situation if we get a very cold spell, and I possibly might bring them in, but hopefully they shouldn't need it. Next, it's just got to be some Ami, hasn't it? Look at that. I've always found Ami Majors quite easy to grow. It likes a warm daytime temperature with a cooler evening temperature, around 15 to 18 degrees during the day. It's usually naturally that temperature in the greenhouse. However, the last couple of years, our weather has been all over the place. And I know that some of you have got greenhouses which are not in the ideal positions. So I have done a little bit of an experiment. So here we've got our Ami Major seeds. I've opened the envelope and the foil carefully so I can put any seeds I don't need back. Here's our seeds. You can see they are very small. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a small impression in the compost, and then, oops, sow one seed per cell, or as best you can. They're very easy to prick out later if you end up with two germinated in the same cell. There we go. And then what you can do is you can either sift a little bit of compost over the top, or you can just cover them up gently, like I'm doing here, with some nice moist compost. Now it's not essential, but darkness and a little bit of pre-chilling just helps things along, speeds up the process of germination. So if you're an impatient gardener like me, then you might want to do the same.
You're curious now, aren't you? So look, I'm going to do an experiment. Here you can see my labels. These seeds we've just sown, chilled and buried, but then I've done another couple of rows of seeds which I've chilled, but then I haven't covered them. And on the other end we've got seeds that have been buried but not chilled.
Put the Ami Majors up here on the top shelf in a light bright position. As a result of my experiment, I've now changed the Autumn Jumpstarter handbook with the advice that you can help things along. You can increase germination rates and the speed of germination by pre-chilling the seeds in the fridge for 2 weeks, and then when you sow them, to cover them over with compost. I've done an experiment where I've sown some seeds that I've buried but not chilled, some seeds that I've chilled but not buried, and the seeds that I have chilled and buried. So I'm going to show you that seed tray right now.
We've got my controlled experiment, and you can see that this section here is germinating faster. Now these seeds, you can see from the label, were both chilled and then buried. Then by contrast, you can see from the label, these seeds were chilled but they were not buried, and you can actually see them on the surface. They are still germinating, but the chilling has actually given them a jump start. For this side, these seeds were not chilled and they were buried. So all that's happening is the compost is keeping them a bit warm. So if you're going to do anything, the chilling really helps.
So chilling and then burying the seeds is the quickest way to get germination to occur. However, they will still germinate. You're just going to have to wait a little bit longer for Mother Nature to chill the seeds out in the greenhouse, and then they will start germinating naturally, which, to be fair, is what I have always done, because I've never been in a particular hurry. However, I do like an experiment. So fast forward, it is now late winter, and haven't they done well? Look at those roots. They do need a little bit more room, so I'm going to pop them on now into 15 cell trays, or you can use 9cm pots, whatever is easier for you.
Don't fancy the pouring rain out of the window, I know I don't. If you have a look at the website, all the new videos have now been added, so you should be up to date. Everything's here for you. It's getting quite a big page now. Look at all of that. I'll keep you quiet.